Hi everyone, John here, welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how you can use particle illusion with Continuum and Mocha Pro to make a shot look just a little more realistic. So let's jump in. Alright, so I'm here in After Effects and this is actually a half-finished project. I did finish the look once and then I went through and deleted a whole bunch of things and reset a few things so that we can walk through those parts step by step, okay? So in here, I have this footage comp soloed and my footage is inside there. Now the reason I have my footage separate from the particles is because I have 1, 2, 3 particle layers. Now these are all the same particle layer. It's the same setup for all 3, but they're actually in different positions based on how I'm using them, okay? So that's why I haven't actually applied the particle illusion effect directly to the footage here. I have in the pre-comp, but I'll show you in a sec how we're going to switch that out with a solid. So, very simply, that's the footage layer. Above that is the particles. Now, it's all going to be blown out because, like I said, I have to replace this with a black solid, but I wanted to leave that turned on first of all so we could explore the particle illusion setup with the footage turned on. Okay, so why don't we do that? Let's jump into particle illusion. And particle illusion 2024.5 has just been released. So I wanted to take full advantage of the new motion path presets. And that's one thing I wanted to show you. So this entire look that I've created here is based on the pixie dust preset. Okay. And pixie dust is a really useful preset to use when you're doing any kind of motion path work. It's got that classic sort of Tinkerbell pixie dust look. I've just replaced the particle. We'll look at that, the particle node in a moment. Let's start by looking at the emitter. I've got that selected. And in particle illusion 2024.5, if you select position and right click, you can choose to load a preset. And here we have a range of different presets that you can use to apply to your motion path, okay? And you can see the one over here that we're using at the moment has a yellow dot. And that's because I've saved that as a custom preset. I'm just going to cancel that. And it's good to know you can actually go into that preset dialog box at any time and change the path whenever you want. So, like I said, I've actually created my own custom one. And I just wanted to mention that in order to save a preset, make sure you have position selected, then come down to the graph and you would click save, okay? Which I've already done. So that's my preset, okay? Now I want to point something out. When the animation finishes its move, you can see when it stops here at the end of the motion path, if I move to the end of the timeline, notice how we're still seeing particles? So they're still being emitted. Now, I could slide that way away from the stage so we didn't see these particles. But there's a new feature in 2024.5. If I right click on the emitter, I can choose stop emission when motion ends. And that's going to keyframe the number of particles so that when it ends the movement, we no longer see those particles, which is great. Always had to do that manually in the past. All right, so that's the emitter. Let's take a look at the particle node. So like I said, this is based on pixie dust. So I've just double clicked on the particle and just changed it to a blur rather than a sort of a spiky star. And come over to my gradients and grabbed one of the great gradient presets just by clicking on load preset. Particle illusion is becoming a lot more preset driven now, which is great. It's just really useful. I find it really useful when I can just grab presets for things like the gradient. And also down here you can see I've animated the weight over life. And if I right click on that, I can also load a preset. So becoming much faster to work with. And now with the position path presets, that's even enhanced even more. So there's my weight over life. Now I just want to quickly go back to the gradient and just mention something. Notice up here, you can actually see transparency. So in 2024.5, you can now see what the alpha over life gradient is doing inside the color gradient editor. So you can see at the end of the particle's life, when they go blue, they're also fading out, which is really good. And also notice down here, if I select weight over life again, notice you can also see the gradient down here in the timeline. You see in the graph view, which is great. Okay, so you can see what the particle is doing color-wise over its life. Very handy. And you probably already noticed as well that we have some great trails coming from these particles, and that's because I've chosen draw trails. Okay, I really like that feature. It's one of the first things I go for when I'm doing any kind of particle along a path. Really nice. So that's the emitter and the particle. And notice also I have a deflector in here, and I've put the deflector on top of the mobile phone, on top of the cell phone. So watch when the particles drop and hit the deflector, a few of them just kind of catch the edge of that phone and just bounce off. And this kind of thing is really good for making the particles feel more integrated into the shot. Now, notice for hits, I've got that at 16. What that's going to do is going to allow a few particles to pass through. If I make that hits 100, see it's going to block all the particles. And that's not necessarily a great thing for this particular look. So just increasing the hits amount just allows a couple to pass through and just catches a couple. But I was thinking maybe we could add a deflector to her arms, or one of her arms, or both her arms, her forearms. So to do that, what we do is we click deflector, and it's going to grab that deflector and make sure I can get the right one. I've got the other one selected. So this one, I select it, bring that down here. I'm just going to position that maybe actually up like that, and then just bring that down and just going to get that in place around her arm. And you can see it's quite deep. So we need to decrease the depth. Bring that right down. Just holding down shift just to speed that up a little bit. Like that, right? Now, these aren't tracked into the shot, but I don't think that's necessary. You can see how that they're now hitting that sleeve, or they appear to be hitting that sleeve, and sort of sliding down. And this is where, as I mentioned before, just decreasing the amount of hits helps a lot. So we get a few hitting the sleeve like that, and a few going past. And actually that's quite good, because it feels like some of these are in front of the sleeve and some of them are a little further back and they're hitting the sleeve. So there's a little bit of an illusion there. I think that makes a difference to how effective particles are in a shot. And we could always add one on that side as well. Let's just add another one. And I'm going to just grab that and bring that down to here. And then just sort of slide that into place. It's only got to be rough. Particles are pretty organic, so you can get away with a lot. And once again, just bring that depth right down like that, something like that. Maybe I could bring it up a bit. And that's what happens when they hit. So they bounce off a little too perfectly. There's a few too many bouncing off, so we'll just decrease the hits like that. Nice. Still kind of sliding back, aren't they? Which doesn't look great on that side. And I have to say, I did do this one, but I didn't try this side. Let's increase the randomness and see if that helps. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? A little bit more randomness, and probably just really bring the hits down to just a couple. Like that, right? So with all three of those, just get a little feeling that the particles aren't sitting in front of the footage. They're kind of, integrated into the shot. I think that makes a difference. So that's the basic particle setup. And now that I've shown you that with the footage, I'm just going to replace that footage with a black solid. So I've got a solid in here. I think this one should be fine, 1920 by 1080. So I'm just going to replace that, and that's great. So now back in the main comp, it's not going to get blown out. Notice here, the reason we can actually see the particles, not the black, is because I have the add blend mode selected. Okay. So footage and particles sitting over the top. And you might, when you're working, only have enough time to do something like that. And that's fair enough. But if you had a little bit of extra time, you can add a few extra layers, a few extra particle duplicates to make this look a little more realistic. So that's what we're going to do. So above that, we have body. Okay, now I've half baked this. So what we've got is a black solid, because this is the particle comp. Okay, I've just renamed it body, and it's set to add. If I turn that off, you can see it just looks like she's wearing some kind of black skivvy. I'm going to bring that back to add. And I've also applied BCC plus blur. So if we just turn that off, you can see there's the particles. So, and notice they're also masked out. I've done a really rough mask here. It's just a couple of keyframes on mask path, just to make it, sit around her jacket and just up above her glasses. I could have come a little bit lower, but I think that was fine for this, just to keep it away from the background. And adding BCC plus blur. So the idea is that the particles are passing in front of her and they're illuminating, her body a little bit. And I think one thing we could do to make this look a little more realistic is use some displacement mapping. So I'm just going to type in DISPLACE, displacement map. Okay, I'm going to double click that to apply it. And let's just solo this and take a look. So we've got displacement map. So I'm going to increase the horizontal, and I'm going to increase the vertical. And it looks weird because we haven't given it a displacement map layer. So we're going to choose the footage. So now we're getting the footage to displace the blurred particles. And what it kind of looks like is the light is being affected by the bumps and the concave and convex areas of her jacket. The idea is that it breaks it up and gives it a more realistic look, as if the light is actually, illuminating her jacket and her jumper. If you have a look in here, you can see it's a little darker in there, a little brighter in there. And that's because we've got different areas of darkness and brightness based on how that's being displaced by the footage. I use displacement maps a lot like this. Just a little bit of extra work to do it, but it just can make a little difference about how layers, affect other layers. We're going to use that again in a moment on the face. Okay, so as it passes in front, just gets displaced a little bit and just looks a little bit more realistic. So we've got our particles. Let me just turn the glow on and off. We can probably bring that glow actually below the particles. I think it probably shouldn't make too much of a difference. Like that, okay? All right, so above that we have the glasses, and this is kind of the main thing. To be honest, this illumination pass on her jacket was kind of an afterthought. The main thing that I wanted to do was have the reflection in the glasses, because I think that's what kind of sells this shot. So if we turn that on, take a look at this. You can see how we get that reflection in the glasses. And in order to be able to get that looking effective, needed to mask the glasses off. And to do that, I've used Mocha Pro. And the Mocha Pro effect is applied to the glasses layer, and the glasses layer is the footage, okay? And you can see I've used a matte. So if I choose no matte, there's my particles, and there's my glasses. So I'm just going to undo that for a moment and come back and open up Mocha Pro. Now, Particle Illusion has Mocha built in, and most of the time I just use it as part of Particle Illusion. But here, as we saw, I have multiple particle layers. So it made more sense to use Mocha Pro and create the matte separately. I'll have a look at this first. I've got this track spline, and the track spline is tracking her glasses. And I've got right and left lenses, and they're both linked to the track. So let's turn these off. And just put that back up there. And let's do it again. So I'm going to create a spline. It's just going to be making sure that I'm back at 0 seconds. Just make a rough, quick spline around the glasses, okay? And right mouse button just to accept that. Just like that. And I'm not going to track the shear, just to translation, scale, and rotation. And I'm going to hit track. All right, so that's finished. And it looks like we've got a pretty solid track there. So I'll call this track 2. All right. And I'm just going to turn off the little gear here. And now I'm going to just create new splines for the lenses. These are going to be a little more exact. So it's going to come in and draw these. Select them all and then just drag the handle in to make them round. And just bring them to the inside of the glass frame, like this. Yeah, so something like that. We're not going to necessarily use these ones. I just wanted to show you exactly how I did this. So once that's set up, I'm still at 0 seconds. And this is going to be left. I guess that's a right eye, isn't it? So right 2. And select that and choose link to track 2. So now when I drag the time indicator forward, you can see pretty much that doesn't require any more work. If it does slip slightly, I can always just move the time indicator, make a slight adjustment, which adds a keyframe automatically. And that's all that needs to be done. Okay, so really easy to use Mocha Pro to do these kind of tracks. So I'm going to actually just cancel this. Okay, back here in After Effects, just in the Mocha Pro effects, I've just chosen Apply Matte. Okay, so applying the matte, which gives me an alpha matte. And once again, just using a alpha matte here in After Effects, an alpha track matte. Okay, that's Luma matte. And choosing glasses. And there we go. So for the actual particles, what I've done is I've just positioned them because they're a separate layer. You can see I positioned them up a little higher. I could put them wherever I want. Probably, I thought a little higher was a little better. She's looking down and maybe the reflection would be a little bit lower. And you can see to the particle layer, I've applied 2 effects. BCC plus Film Glow. And this is great because the glow makes it feel as if her face behind the glasses is being illuminated, which is a little bonus there. So that was really nice. And I was looking at inside the reflection. You can see her phone there. See how that's quite blue? I just thought it might look a little more realistic if the particles also were just a little less bright. So something like that. So I just used BCC Tritone there. Okay, just to knock that back a little bit. Simple, huh? So by this point, I was pretty happy. I mean, I was happy just having the reflection of the particles in the glasses. But as I mentioned before, the illumination on the jacket just helps a little bit. And I also thought, looking at her face, you can see it's fairly shiny, her skin. And you can see the blue reflection of the light from the phone. So I figured if there's a bright light passing in front of her face, you'd see some kind of illumination. And while I couldn't quite get it as shiny, the nice specular points as the phone reflection, I thought a little bit would make a difference. So that's why I used this one here. So I'm just going to solo that. You can see there's her face, or the mask for her face. I'm just going to show you how I set that up. It's exactly the same as the lenses, so it's using the same tracking the glasses. And I've just done a spline around her face and linked that to the track, okay? And some minor adjustments. You can see a few keyframes there just to make sure that, because her face is moving a bit, just to make sure that the spline hugs her face. You see, as I move the time indicator, then make a change, that will add a keyframe. So easy to do quick rotoscoping with Mocha Pro. Quick and precise rotoscoping. So I'm going to close that up. Don't save. And my particles have BCC plus blur applied, and they're being used as a fill for the face, which is being used as a matte. You can see it slides past the face there. And with the blur turned on, you can just see it there. All right, so if I bring the footage back, like I said, it didn't give you that sort of specular, but I think it does make a difference. I think what also would make more of a difference is if we use displacement map for this as well, like we did for the body. So I'm just going to solo that, and I'm going to apply my displacement map. I'm going to choose my footage layer, and I'm going to increase the max horizontal and the max vertical. And you can see something a bit weird. See this here? And this is actually her collar, the collar of her jacket. So those of you who've used After Effects for a while will probably understand why this is happening. This is because if I just press P, the position transform of the layer has actually been adjusted, but it hasn't been pre-composed. So if I bring that back to its default, now we don't see that anymore. But what we have to do, we do need to have it a little higher. So in order to be able to get this to work correctly, we either have to pre-compose and then apply displacement map, or use the transform effect, which I often use. So what I'll do is I'll just do a quick search for transform. This is one of the After Effects distortion effects. Double click. Bring that up above displacement, so the transform's being applied as an effect rather than a standard transform property. And I'm going to change the Y position to what I had down here, which is 342. So now if I solo this, there we go. Now you can see her face, right? We're not seeing her collar. So it's using the footage as we expect. You can see how that's changing the illumination on her face. And go in and just adjust this a little bit. And we can bring some more on top there, or we can play around with it. Like I said, this isn't exactly as if it's real light, and we're not getting this perfect specular here, but it definitely makes it look more like it's following the contours of her face rather than a flat image just plonked on top. All right, so here's the final look again. So hopefully you found that useful. If you'd like to learn more about particle illusion, Continuum, or Mocha Pro, be sure to visit borisfx.com, where you can also download a free trial. For now, this is John. I'll see you in the next tutorial.